You know, living in a foreign country is an education in and of itself. You know, I was sitting around today and I was just laughing because I thought about some of the funny experiences that I had living in England. Some funny experiences and a very good time. I had an awesome time. But I would suggest that anyone that can, they should at least try to live in a foreign country if you can. It's an educational experience, especially if someone has children. Oh my God, the children will never forget spending at least 2 or 3 years living in a foreign country. Now, the majority of the time that I spent in a foreign country, I was in the military, and the difference experiences from living in the military in a foreign country and it's living as a straight up civilian. You know, it's a huge difference because in the military you live sometimes in a foreign country on the base, and you're living around Americans all the time. Everybody's speaking English. Everybody's, you know, it's Americanized because military bases are considered American soil anyway, no matter where they are. So, and then even if you live off base, a lot of other military families are living around you, and when you socialize, you're socializing with other Americans, and even if you do socialize with some people of the country, you still spend the majority of your time with Americans. If you go, even when you go out on tours and things, you're surrounded with Americans as well. So, but my last time living abroad was when I lived in England, and I lived in England as a civilian with my current job. And I've talked about this before. So I lived in England. I worked and lived in England from 2013 to 2015, and I lived amongst British people in the neighborhood. In fact, I was the only black American with a southern accent that lived in this little town that I lived in. It was called Lytham, Lytham. It was a retirement community. They call it pensioners. It's very posh. I learned the word posh meant, whatever. And so I lived there. When I first got there, I stayed at a hotel. Now the town Lytham is next to, and it's right there on the ocean. It's next to a town called St. Anne's, and they like to put it together. They call it Lytham St. Anne's, and it's in Lancashire. I think Lancashire, I guess you could call that the county, I guess. So it's right there together. And so I lived there the entire time that I was over there. I even stayed at a hotel there. So when I first got there, because I didn't have a place to live, and all my household goods hadn't gotten there yet. We had to ship all that over there. So you get there before your stuff. So I had to stay at a hotel for 45 days. I stayed at the Grand Hotel. It is a awesome hotel. Very high-end hotel. They have an awesome cafeteria. They have an awesome restaurant. I mean, and the breakfast, the English breakfast. That's when I first got introduced to the English breakfast. And it's included in my bill. So I before I went to work every morning, I ate that breakfast, and I gained 12 pounds in 45 days because I kept getting up every morning eating that English breakfast. They call it the bacon what they call bacon is really ham, and it's also oh my God, it was delicious, and the croissants. So anyway, I stayed there for 45 days, and I had to rent a car. Because my vehicle hadn't gotten there either. So they call it hire a car. We call it rent a car. I used to get into it with my neighbors and say, you can't hire a car. I said, you hire people and you rent things. And it was like, we'd go back and forth. They had a good time. So anyway, I had to hire a car. And I had rented this little 4-door Ford, and it had a hatch. So one morning, and it was an English car, okay? So I came out and one morning to go to work, and you know how on the dash it'll let you know if there's a door open. Well, it kept saying my boot was opened, and I didn't know what that was. And so I sat there, so I got out and I slammed all the doors, and it still had boot open. And so this English guy, the British guy, came out to get in his car, and I asked him, I said, could you look and tell me what this is? He says, oh, so it was my hatch. So a boot is really the trunk of a car in England. It means a trunk. So he slammed that. So that's a funny thing that I learned. I learned about that. And another funny thing. So I worked at this facility, manufacturing facility. I'm a supply chain manager, and I'm not going to say what the name of it was. And my colleagues, all Americans, it was a team of us, and then everybody else was British. British people, so I would walk through the facility and I would do this, that's how I speak to people, I was being cool, what's up? So two of the British guys said, come here, Pat, come here. And they were just laughing at me and they said, did you know what you did? And I was like, no. They said, you just gave us the finger. I said, I did not do that. And so they told me the history. So the history was this is the history of this. They call this a two-finger salute over there. It's just like giving the British people the finger. Now the British were in a war with the French. It's in 1415, and the British were good at archery, so they would use that bow, and they could really, and they won that war. But the French thought that they could, I guess, handicap the British by cutting off these two fingers, because if they cut these two fingers off, they wouldn't be able to, pull that bow, So they cut these two fingers off. Well, any of the British soldiers that still had these two fingers, when they would come across the French, they would shake them at them. They call it a two-finger salute. And it was an insult, because what they were saying is, I still have my two fingers, and that means I can still fight, And so that's what they did. So when you go over there and you do this, so I had to stop doing that. I was so embarrassed because I was going around through the plant doing this to these people. And so when I take photos, I used to always take pictures and I threw the peace sign. Well, once I found that out, I would take a picture, and post it. I'd do this. And so one of my friends said, what are you doing with your hands? And I told him, I had to explain to him. I said, listen, this is giving the British people the finger. And so I had to find something else to do with my hands. So I started doing this, So I learned that. I learned what a queue is. They call a queue a line, standing in the queue. So that's what that is. I learned the telephone, they would call it a telly. And, we call it telly. I remember my parents and my aunts, they were very old people. I called them old. They were old to me. And she would call the telly a television. But they call the telly over there. No, they call the telly a television over there. My aunt, my mom's oldest sister, she called the telly a telephone. So I was like, okay. So I learned the telly is a television over there. So when I finally rented a house, one thing they do when they rent houses over there, at least in this part where I was living, they take you to see the house with the people still in it. Now, it doesn't even have to be clean. They show how, I'm talking about renting a house, leasing a house, not buying. They take you right then, and the people in the house. Doesn't matter if it's clean or not. So I'm thankful, because I saw a couple of houses, but the house that I chose was pretty clean. It was a doctor, I think, that was leasing it at the time, and so it was pretty clean. So I said, that's the house I want. So anyway, it said, and it had 5 bedrooms. We call them sunrooms. I think they call them conservatories. It had 2 living rooms, but they call one of the living rooms a receiving room. It had a dining room and a kitchen and 2 full baths and a water closet. Okay. So once I finally moved in and I went through everything, and I went to work, and I told my colleagues, I said, they say I'm supposed to have a water closet, and I never did find that water closet. And they said, Pat, that meant the half bath. So the water closet is a half bath. Okay, you know what we call it? That's what a water closet is. And all the homes have water closets. And all the homes had, we call sunrooms. They all had that. So you said, well, why'd you have such a big house? Okay, so that's another thing. So because our company was giving us an allowance, they gave us so much for rent and utilities, so we maxed it out. Why? And then the British people say, you're greedy. You don't need that big house. Why didn't you get a flat? A flat is an apartment over there. I said, why should we? And like I said, I didn't have any kids in family, but my colleagues, some of them had kids, but some of them, no. There was a lot of we were single over there. Myself, 2 other single people. We just lived it up. We got the biggest house. One of my colleagues was like a younger guy. He got a penthouse off the chain. You should see it. But he stayed down in Manchester. You should have seen his place. So we maxed it out. Well, so like I said, I didn't know what the water closet was. So that's what, it's a half bath. So, but the British people were the movers. So when my things finally got there and the British people had to move my things in, the guys was like, you don't need all this. You Americans are just greedy. This house is massive. And then when you bring in my things, look at all this stuff you have. You Americans are greedy. And I was like, listen, I work for this. I know England is kind of socialist, and they don't believe in a lot of things like the medical, the healthcare is socialist and all that, and so they thought I didn't deserve it, and because you don't need this big house. He's like, I have a couple of kids and we only have a flat, me and my wife. I said, that's your problem. If that's what you can afford, that's your problem. It has nothing to do with me. So anyway, that's another thing I learned. I know I have some people, some subscribers from the UK, so I think you'll probably enjoy some of these things that I'm talking about that I learned that's hilarious to me, and you probably think, hey, this is just how it is. I learned something about cigarettes. Now, I don't smoke, but I was over to one of my neighbor's house, and we were looking at television. This woman was smoking, and she says, that woman is smoking those fags. I said, what? Don't say that. What are you talking about? Well, so the history of the cigarette is, there's always a lot of history of things. And England is an old country. That's why I chose to go over there. I applied to go over there and I got that position because I knew I would learn a lot of history. Because America is only 240 years old. 240 compared to these other countries. And so we're a pretty young country. But England has all this history. So I said, what are you saying, fag? Why are you saying that? Quit saying that. Because you know how politically correct America is. Now, I'm not politically correct. Okay, but that sounds bad. Fags. So the history is, so women used to go out and gather firewood for the fires. So women would gather firewood and light the fire. So cigarettes is considered a stick with fire on the end. So because women were gathering the fire and women are feminine, they named cigarettes fags. And I was like, oh my God. And they called them that. They call them that. So anyway, I learned what that was. And I learned what posh means. Posh means, this. So when I be on the train a lot of times, traveling, and I tell people I lived in Lytham. And they're like, oh, you're posh. And I was like, okay, yeah, so that sounds good. I mean, if you're going to say I'm posh, I'm going to be posh. So I started bragging about it. That's the first thing I would tell people when I'd get on the train. I'd sit down with some people and I'd tell them, I live in Lytham. Because I knew they were going to think I was all that. So that was a good thing. I had a good time with that. Let me see, what else did I learn? I told you about the food. No, okay, so the cars. I don't want this video to be too long, but this is fun stuff. I learned, first of all, me and my colleagues, we all learned that we were getting ripped off in the U.S. with cars. Because, so I had my car, when my car finally got there, I had a Dodge Avenger. And my car was huge. All of our cars were huge compared to the cars over there. They drive those little 4-doors, like that little hatch thing I had. That's the whole family car over there. And when I would park my car in these little bitty parking spots, and the roads was really little too, the narrow roads, my car would be sticking all the way out. You could spot my car a mile away in the parking lot. But when I finally realized that I had to buy a British car was when I went to McDonald's for the first time. So I go through the drive-through because our steering wheel is on the left. Over there, their steering wheel is on the right. So of course the drive-through is on the side where the steering wheel is. So I'm like, oh, way over here. I had to get out and walk around and get my food. So I said, okay, I can't continue to do this. So I parked, plus gas was like $8 a liter over there. So, $8, I'd say a gallon, $8 because it was a gas guzzler. So I got a little bitty car. All my co-workers, we all got little English cars over there. But this is what I want to tell you about the cars. So I went to this little dealership in my little town, and it was this little red car, and I love red. And I wanted automatic. Most of their cars are manual, but I wanted automatic. I didn't have time for that. I can drive a manual, but I don't want to. So it had this red 4-door little red Skoda. And it was perfect. It looked like it was brand new on the inside and out. It had hardly no miles on it. And I said, I want how much is that car? So it cost me like 2,000 pounds, which is about $3,500 because the dollar was very weak to the pound. And I was like, that's all? And my colleagues, they were all buying cars too. One of my colleagues was buying BMWs. He was buying 2 and 3 cars. I said, what are you going to do? Start selling cars on the side while you're over here? That's just how cheap the cars were. Now, these were not old or beat up cars. These were late model cars. Now, those cars would have cost way more had we bought them in the U.S. That's when we realized, hey, we're getting ripped off on cars. But one thing about it, also the oil over there, they put, I guess it's thick synthetic, some kind of oil where it lasts longer. Because once I got that little car, I was used to getting my oil changed every 3,000 miles in the U.S. So I get this little car, and then when it gets to the 3,000 mile mark, I'm thinking, okay, it's time for me to get my oil changed. So I remember I told you in a prior video that I had started a history and art group while I was over there. And we used to go all over England and, and tour all the historical sites. We'd get on the train and just meet at the site where we were going. And sometimes I would drive. So this particular time I had driven there, and we were coming out of the, wherever we were, and one of the guys with me, I said, I think I need to get my oil changed. I said, because I'm at 3,000 miles. And he didn't know what I was doing. He said, well, just flip your bonnet and let me check it. I said, what are you talking? What's a bonnet? So that's the hood. So the bonnet is a hood. So I flipped the thing, I pulled the thing, and he looked at it, and he said, look how clean this oil is. You don't need an oil change. But I didn't want to hear that, because in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't care how clean it is. And it was clean. It was very, very clean. So the next day, I called the guy. They call it a garage. We call it a garage. They call it a garage, because at the dealership they have a garage as well. And then remember, I'm the only black in the town. American black with a southern accent, so everybody knew who I was. So the minute that he heard me on the phone, he just said, Miss Dixon. I was like, how do you know who I am? He says, what can I do for you? And I said, I need to get my oil changed in my car. He says, no, you don't. And I said, well, I'm at 3,000 miles. He said, you don't need to get it changed until a year. I said, a year? A whole year without changing your oil in your car? He says, yes. And so over there you can go, so I'm thinking, okay, so in the U.S. either they're ripping me off or something, because how come they can use this kind of oil that can last a whole year? And when you do get it changed after that year, it's like maybe $100 US, maybe 70 something dollars, or maybe 85 US and 60 some odd pounds over there. Well, that's worth it. You've gone an entire year. So I'm thinking, okay, then you're ripping us off. And another thing I found out, me and my colleagues found out, is they are ripping us off in the U.S. on cell phone plans. Okay, so over here in the U.S., I have T-Mobile. But while I was over there, I had their sister company. And for some reason, I just cannot think of it. But I had their sister company as a cell phone provider. I was paying £25 a month. That's like $35 a month. For unlimited everything. My colleagues was the same thing. And some of them had kids. So they'd have like a wife and 2 kids, and they'd have 4 lines. Each line was £25. That's £100 a month, unlimited everything. I pay way more than that here in the U.S. Way more. So I said, okay, they're ripping us off in the U.S. on cell phone plans. I said, because if they can do it over there for £25, maybe $35 for unlimited everything, why can't they do that in the U.S.? Now, the phones were just as expensive, but I'm talking about the plans. So I learned that. So what else? I'm trying to think of things that I told you about the fags. I told you about the water closet. But I just had a good time over there. And it was a learning experience. My neighbors, I used to go over there. This is really funny. They're afraid of guns over there. So because they're afraid of guns, and of course we couldn't bring our guns over there. All my colleagues, because you couldn't bring anything. One of my colleagues said they had those, what do you think, swords or whatever, that they collected. You couldn't bring anything like that over there. So I would go over there and they listened to the U.S. news. Okay, they had a CNN over there, and then they had the BBC, which is fake news too. So CNN. The UK is fake news, and the BBC is the same thing. So they heard all about the shootings and stuff, and they were just terrified of guns. And I would go over to their houses, and I said, I have a lot of guns. I said, I'm stockpiling them. I have so many guns. They said, oh, you crazy. Now, I really don't stockpile them, but I have guns. But I wanted to do it to scare them even more, because they were so afraid of guns. And one of my neighbors, they had a grandson. He was like 11 or 12, and he would come stay with them in the summer for like a month. And it was his birthday. So I went out and bought him a toy gun, and he loved it. And they was like, what are you trying to do to my grandson? And he loved me to death because I bought him a gun. I said, he needs a gun. He's a boy. But he was over there, and he heard me saying I was stockpiling guns. He says, well, what you buying all those guns for, Patricia? I said, it's going to be another war. They thought I was nuts talking about all the guns. So they said, you think America's everything. You think America's better than everybody. I said, we are. America is better. We're the best country in the world. I bragged about America all the time over there to those people. And they said, you think you know everything. So, no, but I had such a good time. Those people treated me with nothing but respect. I threw parties at my house. I went to their homes. I had to start drinking tea. I don't really like tea, but I bought a tea set and we had tea parties and just had a good time. So I just want to tell you about some of the fun things that I learned and some of the fun times that I had while living in England. Have a blessed day.